I would like to I would like to start this video off by giving a special shout out to WNBA player Monique Billings on her new book. Um, it's I can't wait to get into it. Finding Balance, a playbook for wellness. I'm gonna read the back to you guys. Give you a little introduction. Monique Billings is a woman who values faith, family, friends, and living life to the fullest. It's no wonder she's been able to balance a thriving WNBA and international pro basketball career while also being a sportscaster, social media influencer, global keynote speaker, and author. Monique has overcome many obstacles in her climb to the top and has seen many succumb to life's pressure along the way, motivating her to share her strategies to help others overcome as well. In her first book, she shares her insights and perspective on balancing a busy, high performing, high achieving life while keeping yourself as the star player. Turn the pages and find the keys to unlocking the best version of you. We live in a fast paced, move, go, rush world full of distractions and short attention spans. In finding balance, Monique Billings challenges you to cultivate your mind and well-being the same way an athlete cultivates their game. Billings provides a playbook for wellness designed to help you find balance, reach greatness and excellence according to your own standard. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. This little short passage here on the first inside the cover. It's important to realize that you are living inside one of your answered prayers while you wait for your next one. There's always place for gratitude. It's awesome. I'm dedicating this special project to my father. He transitioned in November 2021 after a hard-fought battle with ALS. I am nothing without him. These concepts and ideals that I have adopted don't exist without the legacy that he has instilled within me. My father was the most balanced person that I ever knew. Throughout my entire life, all the way up until his passing, he would remind me to find balance in my mind, my body, and my spirit. He was a God-fearing man, full of faith and positivity. He blessed me with my favorite quote, which is, "Be better than yesterday, but not as good as tomorrow." I miss him greatly and daily, but I feel his spirit in copious number of ways. One of my goals in life is to honor him and continue his legacy. All right. Chapter 1 is Forward by Taylor Brooks. Chapter 1 is Be Still. And this is for Forward by Taylor Brooks. Ever since I was young, I've heard people talk about the importance of creating balance in your life. However, through time, I realized that balance is actually something that you create within yourself. The only way to achieve this is by learning more about who you truly are. Finding that balance is the key to reaching all your life's goals, no matter how big or small. Without it, it's incredibly easy to get lost in this fast-paced and unforgiving modern world we live in. It took me a lot of practice and mistakes to figure it out, but fortunately, I was able to get an early start. I was raised in a huge sports family that consisted of superfans, professional athletes, and even a Hall of Famer. This environment exposed me to the benefits of a meticulous work ethic and disciplined life habits that I still carry with me today. I had to find balance between being a student, needing to study and do homework, while also having internship opportunities and landing national reporting roles in college, all while developing a sense of self and just being a kid in school growing through life's many transitions. Being able to balance it all allowed me to become an on-air host and reporter for Big Ten Network. At 22 years old, just a couple of months after graduating college, that further led to a hosting role with Bleacher Report and Turner Sports that ultimately gave me my own digital show where I interview the highest level athletes and celebrities on the most important aspects of their public and private lives. I have worked incredibly hard to achieve the goals I set for myself, but that work and dedication means absolutely nothing without having the aforementioned balance. Without it, I would have succumbed to the pressure and given up a long time ago. More importantly, I didn't do it alone, not even close. I had infinite help along the way. That's what makes me so excited about this book from my friend Monique. It will continue to help me along the way. Yeah, from my friend Monique, because it will continue to help me along the way. Being a woman in the sports industry can feel like an uphill battle, and it takes a specific mindset to be able to withstand the obstacles it throws your way. When I first met Monique years ago, I immediately knew she possessed all the skills and mental fortitude to thrive in this arena. It was evident in the way she carried herself. It was also evident in her impressive and extensive resume. You don't get to the level of sustaining a WNBA career, overseas basketball career, and all the other work she's doing without achieving balance to handle it all. Now, she's written this book to share what she has learned along the way. I can only imagine the positive impact this book would have had on my own life growing up while discovering my own wellness practices and a sense of self. There was countless lessons I learned the hard way that could have been avoided with this step-by-step guidance. The good thing is, I can still benefit from it because having balance within yourself is truly a lifelong practice. This is daily work, and now, because Monique has shared this book with us, I have the steps I need all written out to help me maintain balance. I know this text will give you the tools and encouragement you need to direct your energy in meaningful and fruitful ways. Please remember that balance does not look the same for everyone, and that's why this book is so important. Achieving this rhythm takes time, effort, and work. It means breaking old habits and creating new beneficial ones to help you succeed. You hold all the keys to your freedom and peace of mind. But the only way to achieve that is through self-reflection. The words on these pages will keep you centered and motivated. All you have to do is read them. Best of luck on your journey. We'll hold there for that one. Monique Billings, thank you again for your autographed book. I can't wait to get deeper into it and really receive and comprehend everything. All right, we're going to move on to our Malcolm X autobiography. Okay. Later in Paris, I was to meet Richard Wright's widow, Ellen, a younger daughter Rachel. I talked with ambassadors at their embassies. The Algerian ambassador impressed me as a man who was dedicated totally to militancy and to world revolution as the way to solve the problems of the world's oppressed masses. His perspective was attuned not just to Algerians, but to include the Afro-Americans and all others anywhere who were oppressed. The Chinese ambassador, Mr. Huang Ha, a most perceptive and also most militant man, focused upon the efforts of the West to divide Africans from the peoples of African heritage elsewhere. The Nigerian ambassador was deeply concerned about the Afro-Americans' plight in America. He had personal knowledge of their suffering, having lived and studied in Washington, D.C. Similarly, the most sympathetic Mali ambassador had been in New York at the United Nations. I breakfasted with Dr. Makanan of British Guiana. We discussed the need for the type of Pan-African unity that would also include the Afro Americans, and I had a talk in depth about Afro American problems with Nana Nketia, the Ghanaian Minister of Culture. Once, when I returned to my hotel, a New York City call was waiting for me from Mal Good of the American Broadcasting Company. Over the telephone, Mal Good asked me questions that I answered for his beeping tape recorder about the Blood Brothers in Harlem, the rifle clubs for Negroes, and other subjects with which I was being identified in the American press. In the University of Ghana's Great Hall, I addressed the largest audience that I would in Africa, mostly Africans, but also numerous whites. Before this audience, I tried my best to demolish the false image of American race relations that I knew was spread by the U.S. Information Agency. I tried to impress upon them all the true picture of the Afro American's plight at the hands of the white man. I worked on those whites there in the audience. I've never seen so many whites so nice, so many blacks as you white people here in Africa. I've never seen so many whites so nice to so many blacks as you white people here in Africa. In America, Afro Americans are struggling for integration. They should come here to Africa and see how you grin at Africans. You really got integration here. But can you tell the Africans that in America you grin at the black people? No, you can't. And you don't honestly like these Africans any better either. But what do you like is the minerals Africa has under her soil. Those whites out in the audience turned pink and red. They knew I was telling the truth. I'm not anti-American, and I didn't come here to condemn America. I want to make that very clear, I told them. I came here to tell the truth, and if the truth condemns America, then she stands condemned. One evening, I met most of the officials in Ghana, all of those with whom I had previously talked, and more at a party that was given for me by the Honorable Kofi Bako, the Ghanaian Minister of Defense and the leader of the National Assembly. I was told that this was the first time such an honor was accorded to a foreigner since Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois had come to Ghana. There was music, dancing, and fine Ghanaian food. Several persons at the party were laughing among themselves, saying that at an earlier party that day, U.S. Ambassador Mahami was knocking himself out, being exceptionally friendly and jovial. Some thought that he was making a strong effort to counteract the truth about America that I was telling every chance I got. Then an invitation came to me which exceeded my wildest dream. I would never have imagined that I would actually have an opportunity to address the members of the Ghanaian parliament. I made my remarks brief, but I made them strong. In quotations, how can you condemn Portugal and South Africa while our black people in America are being bitten by dogs and beaten with clubs? I said I felt certain that the only reason Africans, our black brothers, could be so silent about what happened in America was that they had been misinformed by the American government's propaganda agencies. At the end of my talk, I heard, yes, we support the Afro-American morally, physically, materially, if necessary. In Ghana, or in all of Black Africa, my highest single honor was an audience at the castle with Asa Jaifeo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. All right, hold it there. Put that Malcolm X. You know what I'm saying? Just adding it to the list, adding it to the list. All right, back to the Frederick Douglass. The land and the extended families of slaves were part of the Home Hill Farm, owned by Anthony, whom Douglass called Old Master. Anthony owned some 30 people and adjoining farms of 600 acres in all. Although he did not live at Home Hill, he was the managing overseer of a much larger operation, the Y Plantation, some 12 miles to the west. By his brutal exercise of power and possibly by blood, Anthony was and still is a crucial and mysterious figure in Douglass's story. The district in which Douglass lived his first 6 years was known as the Tuckahoe in the northeast section of the Talbot County, the whole of which was drained by the larger Choptank River as it meandered to Chesapeake Bay. Douglass later uncharitably described the area as a famine-stricken with a worn-out, sandy, desert-like appearance of its soil, but he could also remember with a somber nostalgia the stillness of the Tuckahoe and the Kentucky Ravine, as it was locally known, which provided a path down to the river's edge. The nearest villages and the first towns he ever saw were Hillsborough, just 2 miles upriver to the north of the Bailey's cabin, and Denton, due east across the river, and Caroline County, some 5 miles away. The boy enjoyed many hours of watching the commercial bustle in the great wheel Lee's Mill, just a mile north across fields of corn. Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey was the son of Harriet Bailey, one of Betsy and Isaac's 5 enslaved daughters. The second of the multiple names, most uncommon for a slave, can be attributed to his uncle Augustus, Harriet's brother, who had died 2 years before the boy's birth. Washington, perhaps his mother, lonely and sexually abused, with so little to provide for her newborn, sought in a moment of anguished pride to link this child to the father of the country rather than to a father he could never really know. Frederick only rarely saw his mother in the first years of his life. His tender and lyrical remembrances of her are almost pure invention. He never saw her at his grandmother's cabin, but recollected a handful of nighttime visits from his mother after he was transferred to the large Y plantation at age 6. Born in 1792, Harriet gave birth to 7 children between 1813 and 1825. Year after year, she was hired out to other farms, often as much as 12 miles away, but she sometimes walked the distances to visit her children at night and trekked dusty paths back to meet the overseer's horn by morning. My poor mother, Douglass wrote, like many other slave women, had many children but no family. Douglass's knowledge of his mother, he maintained, was scanty but very distinct. Her personal appearance and bearing are infatigably stamped upon my memory. As time passed in his autobiographical quest, Douglass's mother grew in stature, beauty, and influence. In 1845, he recollected that he had never seen her in daylight, but by 1855 she emerged from memory, tall and finely proportioned, of deep black glossy complexion, had regular features, and among other slaves was remarkably sedate in her manners. What the cruelty of slavery had stolen from him, he seized back in his empowering imagination. Douglass found a picture of an Egyptian king Ramsay's, and James Cowles Pritchard's Natural History of Man, the features of which so resemble those of my mother, that I often recur to it with something of the feeling which I suppose others experience when looking upon the pictures of their departed ones. The mother he hardly knew became dignified, even regal, all but without gender, and one of many shields of protection he built around himself as a storyteller. In a scene that became common in male slave narratives, Douglas told of the last time he saw his mother, in 1825, perhaps February, not long after he had been taken to live with Anthony's family at the Y House, and under the stern, abusive rule of the cook, Aunt Caddy. Douglas remembered a wonderful visit from Harriet Bailey. At least while it lasted, Frederick had greatly annoyed Aunt Caddy one day, and she promised a punishment to starve the life out of me. When all the other children hanging around the kitchen received their warm cornbread, Caddy purposely denied young Fred even a morsel. As he sat in a dark corner of the kitchen, as the night wore on, hungry and stealing some Indian corn from a shelf, suddenly his mother appeared to save him. Harriet gave her boy a sweet ginger cake and read Aunt Caddy a lecture she never forgot. The cake was in the shape of a heart, with a rich, dark ring glazed upon the edge of it, implying that it may have been Valentine's Day around the Anthony farms. Douglas called this a pivotal scene in his early life and converted it into both stinging anti-slavery propaganda and an unforgettable expression of the personal pain and loss at the heart of his childhood. That night I learned the fact, he remembered, that I was not only a child, but somebody's child. I was victorious, for the moment, prouder on my mother's knee than a king upon his throne. But the moment was brief. He dropped off to blissful sleep. In the morning, his mother had gone back to her field hands duty miles away. It was the last time he saw Harriet Bailey. She died sometime the next year in 1826. Her illness and her grave unknown. Douglas implies that he was told of his mother's illness as she deteriorated out at the Home Hill farm, but was not allowed to visit her. As a world-famous abolitionist in 1855, Douglas knew well how this story would play on the emotions of his readers, but his words must also be read and interpreted as a child's screams transported by memory into the anguished heart of a lifelong orphan. The heartless and ghastly form of slavery rises between mother and child. Even at the bed of death, he offered his to his sentimental readers. Then he simply spoke for himself and millions of other former slaves, dead and living. It has been a lifelong standing grief to me that I knew so little of my mother, and that I was so early separated from her. The counsels of her love must have been beneficial to me. The side view of her face is imaged on my memory, and I take few steps in life without feeling her presence. But the image is mute, and I have no striking words of hers treasured up. Douglas could see her only from a blurry side view, her voice muted, her very presence glimpsed from a picture of Egyptian majesty and in a natural history book. Physiognomy. Her very presence glimpsed from a picture. He was not left silent. with great enthusiasm. He said he later learned that his mother could read and that she was the only one of all the slaves and colored people in Tuckahoe who could do so. Her achievement was very extraordinary, he proudly declared, and for his own love of letters he credited the native genius of my sable, unprotected and uncultivated mother, who belonged to a race whose mental endowments it is fashionable to hold in disparagement and contempt. For such a great orator and writer to make this claim says at the very least a good deal about how dearly he yearned to know and understand his genealogical and temporal roots in the people and soil of Maryland's eastern shore. It also may say that even to Douglass himself, his extraordinary talent with language, his voice remains something of a beautiful mystery. The identity of his father was an equal but hardly beautiful mystery. This fact, Douglass wrote in 1855, is shrouded in a mystery I have never been able to penetrate. For the rest of his life, he searched in vain for the name of his true father. In his 1845 narrative, Douglass stated, "My father was a white man, admitted to be such by all I ever heard speak of my parentage." Many in the neighborhood also whispered that my master was my father, but of the correctness of this opinion I know nothing. By 1855, his father was still definitely a white man or nearly white. Now, however, Douglass said he was no longer giving credence to Aaron Anthony as his father. Douglass claimed that he had reason to think he was not. By the 1881 writing of Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, the author's third autobiography, the paternity dilemma all but vanished with the simple statement of my father, I know nothing. This was never the case for Douglass. The question was deeply important for him, and in 1855 he dwelled at great length on white fathers of slaves. Indeed, he dwelled on Aaron Anthony. I say nothing of father. Slavery does away with fathers as it does away with families, he wrote. The order of civilization is reversed here. Then he searched with intensity, and descriptive detail for a sense of Anthony's character as the first father figure in his life. Anthony was 51 years old when Frederick Bailey was born, and he owned the adult daughters of Betsy Bailey. But as yet, we have no smoking gun evidence that Anthony is Douglass's natural father. Anthony had two surviving sons in 1818, Andrew and Richard. At ages 21 and 18, they are possible candidates, but with no evidence even of the hearsay variety that Douglass grew up with about the elder Anthony. Douglass carefully described the old master as essentially a cruel tyrant capable of terrible physical and emotional violence, but a man victimized as much by the system of slavery as by his own nature, a theme Douglass repeated as a major part of his autobiographies. He also remembered occasional moments of distracted humanity in Anthony. Most of the time, Anthony paid little, if any, attention to the slave children around the wide plantation yards. He was a busy overseer of the overseers. managing the economic and labor demands of a huge agricultural and commercial enterprise. But on at least one occasion, Douglas remembered old master's affectionate disposition, gently leading me by the hand as he sometimes did, patting me on the head, speaking to me in soft, caressing tones, and calling me his little Indian boy. Douglas used this almost fatherly act as the background for a withering portrait of a smoldering volcano, a brittle, unhappy man of haggard aspect, muttering to himself as he stormed about, cursing and gesticulating at his invisible foes. Hold it there because it's getting deep. Definitely wanna